Welcome to the webinar today, Adapting for Excellence, the Future of Policy and Procedure Management. I'm sure y'all have seen these before, but if you've got a question, feel free to put it in the chat at any time. We would love your questions. We can answer them. We'll have time at the end. So please follow the instructions here if you've got questions to leave for us. Well, I want to welcome our guest, Todd, today. So Todd, welcome. He's the Director of Information Services at City of Grove City, Ohio. Todd, why don't you tell the audience a little bit about your background and all that today for us?
Okay, well, hello, everyone. And again, as Christina said, my name is Todd Hurley. I've been with the City of Grove City for 30 years, so I know that seems so it's been a while. So I serve in the capacity, in a technical capacity for the city. I have since my time here. I will admit to being on city council here in Grove City for the first 3 years, but I usually don't admit that to anybody that I or admit that very often. So thank you for having me today, and I'm looking forward to the conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. And my name's Christina Cook. I'm a Director of Product Marketing here at NEOGOV, and I really work at the intersection of our products and our customers. And I'm really excited to talk with you, Todd, today and talk about policy. So first, real quick, high level, our agenda. We're going to really talk about the importance of policy signatures. We're going to have a little bit about AI in the workplace, what you need to be thinking about when it comes to your policies, the use of AI. So we'll have a brief conversation around that. Also talking about the connection between policy management and creating great new hire experiences. And finally, we'll talk about the benefits of using some kind of digital solution. So let's dive in. Before we get started, love to kind of know who we've got in the audience today. So we're going to have two quick polls. So first, we'd love to hear, does your organization require employees to sign off on policies? We'll give everyone a minute to fill this out. We'd love to hear whether or not you're requiring policy signatures, or maybe you require it for some policies, but not all policies. Give it a couple more seconds here. All right, we've got a decent amount of votes, so let's look at the results. So it looks like almost 60%, so the vast majority require signatures on some policies, and we do have about 12% don't require any type of signature at all. And then those folks in the middle, the 30%, require signatures on everything. Fantastic. I have one more poll for you all. Really curious from our audience today. Does your agency have a policy that addresses the use of AI, whether it's a standalone policy or you address it within an existing policy? I'd love to hear if anyone's already addressed this in their policies or not. All right, well, it looks like the vast majority of our audience today, 97%, so you came to the right place because Todd's going to share a little bit about what they're doing at City of Grove City, and hopefully you can take some of their learnings back and all of that. All right, and I got someone that sent in the questions. They're developing one, but it's not quite implemented, so that's fantastic to hear. Well, before we dive in, Todd's going to share a bit of his experiences with policy management. Want to give a little bit of context here. So prior to Todd working with their policy management software, their police department actually had policy management software in place, and they required all of their officers and first responders to sign off on general orders. So that's a little bit of history. And then kind of things changed and it became a big priority citywide to really think about signatures on policy. So Todd, talk to us a little bit what happened, what was that shift where it became, oh, just the public safety realm is signing to it becoming a very much a citywide initiative, and why is it important?
Okay. I mean, it is an interesting, again, we had at the City of Grove City in our public safety division, the Power DMS product, or what was Power DMS, which is now NEOGOV policy, that product for many years. And so we kind of stayed on the periphery, and it was very important in that structure that, an officer knew what what the general orders were, or the things that he was responsible for, how they were, how they were to handle a pursuit or whatever it might be. So we were talking prior to coming on today just a little bit about the focus for me as an IT professional or director of information systems. Cybersecurity has been more of a focus, and so we started to develop our program. And one of the things that we really realized was, one, we lacked, we did a lot of things very well, but we lacked formal policy for some of the things that, do you have a policy on this or a policy on that? And the answer was no, we do this, we do that, but we don't have that formalized. And so we started to realize around that area that we were really missing a lot of that citywide. And so I jokingly say this, I kind of did a hostile takeover of that system. We took it from using it just in the police division to using it citywide, and the importance of understanding or having people understand what the expectations are up front as an employee of the city of Grove City. So as a part of our onboarding process, being able to say, okay, here's the policy for our appropriate use of assets. Here's our ID policy. We even have it down to what our drone policy is. And a lot of people, I don't need to know what the drone policy is, but it's those things that we articulate to people. So to me, when as a new employee, I walk in, sure, I might go, okay, I have all these policies to acknowledge and sign that I've received them. But I think in my conversations with new employees, they like to see that information up front. So to me, the first point there about being professional, we are really trying to be a professional organization and a local government that handles and does things correctly. The other part to that is the compliance part, to say, we get audited from annually, and it comes from various different places, whether it be the FBI, it comes from the state auditors, financial perspective. They want to see that our employees are aware and are complying to policy that we've set. And it's important that that not only do we have policies in place, but the employees are adhering to those policies and they're aware of those policies. And then the last part to that, the communication, as we do annual review of policy or a policy, we look at something and something has changed that requires an update to that policy, we can communicate to our employees, hey, here's an update, you get it. The nice thing about NEOGOV policy, it will remind you on a daily basis, hey, you have a policy to review. And so it's the system per se, kind of following up with each of our employees or associates to say, hey, there's a policy here. And then one of my favorite parts about the product is, here's the previous policy, here's the new policy. I can do a compare to see, hey, what's changed in those policies. So I've really heard that feedback from our associates in that they're like, okay, it's a 20-page policy. I read it initially or whatever it is, but okay, we've only changed from 15 days to 20 days, and that comparison shows me that, oh, here's the change, and they like that to be more efficient with their time, and then instead of having to try to read the policy and determine what had changed. So those are the things that we really realized as a city as a whole, having those policies in place, having compliance with those policies, and communicating when changes come to those policies has really created an environment where the expectation from an employee from the day that they walk in the door through the day that they leave, that they're responsible to adhere to those policies.
Yeah, absolutely. And as an employee, I can relate. Maybe you just changed the wording on something just slightly, and you're digging through what's the difference here. So being able to see that side by side is super helpful. So let's talk a little bit about AI, because the majority of our audience today has not addressed AI in their policy management. Talk to us a little bit. I know you've been talking to peers in the IT world, and what are y'all considering? What are you thinking about? What are the things our audience should be considering and thinking about when they're developing policy around this topic?
Well, I guess I would start first by saying that if anybody stands up and says they've got it all figured out, then they probably aren't really in tune with the issue as a whole. So relatively new to us, and I think there's still a big gap in understanding what the advantages of use of AI, and then some of the things to consider, some of the risks to consider. You know, AI, and I'll use an example that's maybe a little bit more technical, but excuse me, we use a service that we use to manage and detect and respond to any kind of cybersecurity type threats. We feed a lot of data into that system. So on a monthly basis, we have an annual review with our executive staff here to kind of deliver what our current posture is, what we're doing. And so we feed into this system nearly 3/4 to almost 1 billion data points on a monthly basis. So it's every kind of set of data. So for us to actually sit down and review that and being able to handle that, it would really be extremely difficult to do. And so the use of AI in that function and that service that we subscribe to, they use that. And so that cuts that nearly 1 billion data points down to actual items that are 15 to 20 maybe in a given month, depending on, and that goes, someone was locked out of this, or an administrator, someone who has administrative acts, those kinds of types of scenarios, so that we can follow up and make sure they truly are what they were. So there is a big advantage to AI. But the other part to that, there's other services, I'm sure people have heard of ChatGPT, or and there's various other things. Microsoft is including into some of their offerings now AI functionality, and so there is a lot of power to that. And I wouldn't say anything with that. I think the things to understand though is that there is risk in using AI, and there is risk inherent to that. So let's take a simple thing like, okay, I need to write a policy on the color of undershirts that are allowed in the organizations. So you feed it a set of data, it will write a policy, or it will create that for you. The question and the thing that is really of question, at least amongst my peers, is the data that you feed into that becomes public realm data. And so, sure, I'd like to have it write a policy for me about how I manage this or how we manage that, but unless that information is in the public domain, or you want it in the public domain, it can come back out and surface to be used by somebody else. So, and it could be tied back to your organization. So those are some of the things, the question. The other part to that is having policy in the organization that says, okay, the use of AI is okay, but at the same token, we want to limit that to the use of data with these types of classifications. So public or generally available type of data, but sensitive or restricted information that cannot be used with AI. So there's a lot to learn around this, and like I said, I will be the first one to say that we are still learning that, but we've kind of started down that road to understand that yes, there are pros and cons with the use of AI, and it's one of those things that we really have to truly understand, what types of data. So, on the slide here, the last one, data classification, and that's a policy that is a monster in itself, being able to classify the data that's in your organization, what can be, what can be exposed, what cannot be exposed. To me, that's one of the things that really has to be taken into consideration when you're considering the use of AI. So at the City of Grove City, we've incorporated into our appropriate use policy, a policy that every associate, every employee signs at the beginning of their employment, and now they sign off on an annual basis. We address the use of AI and very loosely, again, not anything that's real strict, but the policy basically states in so many words that the use of AI has to be approved by the Information Systems Department, and that's where my security officer, my chief information security officer, myself, other staff members will sit down and we'll talk about the use and really apply that to the people that are wanting to use it, what classification of data they are using to use that. So it's like I said, it's that other organizations that I've spoken with have put guidelines together. So not so much policy, but guidelines on the use of that. So there's varying structures and levels to doing that. We chose the approach of adding it into our appropriate use policy.
We've got a couple of good questions I think it'll be good to answer now while we're on the topic,
Okay.
Todd. So what do you think is considered sensitive or private in reference to AI? My immediate answer is anything that's PII, personal identifiable information. Are there other things you can think of? I think that's really relevant in the public safety sphere because you may be working with victims or offenders or different things. You definitely wouldn't want that ending up in the public sphere. But is there anything else you can add to that list?
I think, to me, I'll apply it to my environment. So we have our police division. So, any kind of, like you mentioned, sensitive data that if you walk in the front door and you want to report information that would be redacted, so PII, victim information, those kinds of things, I think those fit in a classification that I would want to make sure that you're not using that type of data. And that should be pretty common sense. But also we provide IT for 5 fire departments. So, we start thinking about patient care reports, HIPAA information, those kinds of things that should not be out there. And then, we protect certain, certain aspects to our associates. So someone can't walk in the front door and go, where does Todd Hurley live? Or what's his, they can find out what my salary is, everything that's on our transparency portal, but things that that are protected in that type of thing. So we have all our associates are paid via direct deposit, so that kind of information. So it should, a lot of it should be very common sense, but there are things that maybe not, like anything that has to do with our infrastructure as a city. So whether that's water, sanitary, storm, IT infrastructure, data infrastructure, communication infrastructure, that in our state, or in the state of Ohio, is a protected infrastructure, and that information does not have to be disclosed when publicly requested. So there's like I said, the data classification piece is one that your organization really have to sit down and say, okay, these things are what we consider sensitive. These things are things that are protected, and then that, whether we like it or not, I think there are the aspects to your organization and protecting the reputational care of your organization. So some things, sure, they will ultimately be disclosed to the public, but you want to do that in a fashion that, yeah, okay, the investigation has occurred. And I'm thinking about something. There's a community in Central Ohio that underwent an issue with a phishing of an accounts payable clerk, and they paid somebody in basically they had some money that was stolen. It was paid to the wrong person. So those kinds of things will come out, and those are public record, but we want them to come out after it's been thoroughly vetted and investigated, and making sure that none of that data that is protected goes out with that type of stuff. So again, I really think that comes back to your organization understanding and having data classifications for things that should be protected, non-public, public type of data. And that's another thing that anybody that carries cybersecurity insurance, it was certain multi-factor authentication stuff was a requirement for renewing your cybersecurity insurance. Now the next thing is they're asking about, do you have data classification policies? So again, trying to protect PII and private data.
Yeah, and to your point, we're seeing more and more cyber attacks on different cities and counties. So definitely not feeding any data that kind of goes into your security systems and all of that, that could put you at risk of a cyber attack or anything like that. Great points there. And there was a question about using a single policy versus having multiple policies. It sounds like what you have an appropriate use policy. Within that, you have an approval process for the use of AI, and it's based on data classifications and security best practices versus having every single potential AI tool addressed in the policy.
So that's when I guess I was trying to indicate we're a little bit more general in that, so that and anybody that wants to use that, there is a You know, I think the policy reads that it's prohibited unless approved by, so we have an exclusion process or exception process that the person will go through, put the justification, the department would go through and do that justification. It goes through that process. And we use that same process, whether it's this policy or any other policy. You know, I want an exemption for the drone policy, whatever it might be. We use that exemption process. So that's how we do that. We log those exemptions. We track what those specifically are, and then we review them on an annual basis to make sure that we are okay, this was granted 2 years ago. Is it still valid, still current? So it's those kinds of approach that we do, and that's one of the nice things that we use policy for, that is outside, you know, what is a typical policy. So we have those documents in NEOGOV policy, and we put a revision date from it. So the day that it's approved, the revision is put in there, and we set an expiration for 1 year so that we know a year from now we're going to come back and visit that exception again to make sure it's still valid.
Yeah, and to your point, I think that review process, whether you have a digital system or not, is becoming increasingly important, because we've seen how quickly the technology landscape is changing, which then impacts, you know, organizational decisions.
Sure.
Thank you, Todd, for your thoughts on that. I think we answered a lot of the great questions. Shifting gears a little bit, let's talk about the connection between policy management and creating like a great new hire experience. Oftentimes those two things maybe don't connect in our minds, but I think you've got a really nice process set up. Maybe you can share a little bit about your process and what that process enables you to do to create a great onboarding experience for your employees.
Yeah, and you know, I remind everybody I'm a director of information systems, and somehow in that, you know, last description in my job description, other duties as assigned, I've kind of become the policy police or the policy person that really looks at that. But you know, to me, one of the keys that we've looked at, you know, I'm sure everybody that's on here can attest to the fact that hiring and retaining good employees has become increasingly difficult. And so we looked at that, and you know, for us, the hiring process, it includes HR, it's finance, it's the department that's making that hire, it's information systems, because you know, every department has a system that person may work with or access, you know, even down to our service laborers that, you know, they're carrying a smartphone on, they're using that system to go, okay, hey, we just got a work order, there's a down limb on, you know, Voller Avenue. So we go off and handle that. So the one thing that we struggled with is that we are you know, all our personnel action occur through a personal action form, and we call them PAFs. And so that process is interrelated with HR, it's interrelated with information systems. So we don't do anything until we see that personal action form, because you know, someone goes, hey, we're hiring a new person on Friday, or starts on Friday. Well, I haven't seen the paperwork for that, so we don't do anything. You know, I guess that's me being, you know, the prickly IT person. But so the thought is how do we make it more efficient to onboard somebody? You know, why do we want to take their first day of employment and sit them down and make them sign off on these policies? So we've used, as a big part of it, we've used NEOGOV policy to actually give that employee, prior to them walking in on the first day, the ability to sign off at least on a couple key policies that we need: our appropriate use of assets, our AUP policy, and our ID policy. Our ID policy is what governs access to buildings and the different facilities that we have here at Grove City. So to me, it was very important that, you know, let's let them do that on their time when they can sit down and really digest that. They don't have someone looking over their shoulder, go, are you done yet, kind of thing. So we set that up, and I monitor that. So I get a personal action form that says, hey, we're hiring Christina Cook today. So I put her in, I reply back to HR and say, hey, can you give me your personal email? I do that. I send her an email saying, hey, you're going to get an email enrolling you into NEOGOV policy, and you can sign off on our policies. That way, Christina does that before she steps on campus day one, and then that gives us the ability to set her accounts up. So they're not waiting on IT to go, okay, this person sat here for 2 days because we don't have her login yet, kind of thing. So it really was to try to streamline that process. And then what, like we talked about in the policy signature section, is to create that professional environment that says, oh, hey, these people got their stuff together. They understand that, hey, these are what my expectations are as an employee. So if I would ever travel as an employee, our travel policy, I've seen that. I know that we have one. And so we've gotten that feedback. Yes, we get the feedback from the person like, I don't need to know this. And I understand that, there's the frustration with the guy that's been here for 25 years and knows that he's never going to travel, or he could care less about our drone policy or whatever it is. But now I think they understand that they're aware of that. And so for our new employees, I think setting that expectation up front has helped them clarify our onboarding process. And what's nice is one of our policies is our onboarding policy. So they can look at that and go, oh, in my first day, I'm going to take a tour of the facilities. I'm going to meet my department head, my supervisor, those kinds of things. So to me, it's allowed us to streamline that process, and it's made us more efficient about how we get employees ready to come on and actually take on the responsibility that they're taking on for. And regardless if that's a dispatcher, police officer, a finance person, or someone who is a part-time employee that works in our after-school program in Parks and Recreation, they all sign those policies. They're all responsible for those policies. And I know this is not a sales pitch, but to me, one of the things that I've set up and done is now each department head gets a weekly report on people that have outstanding policies to sign. And as we roll the new ones out on an annual basis, when we do our reviews and changes are made, they can see, oh yeah, we've got a few people that have lagged behind here. And so it's a good way for us to kind of take that whole process, not only from when they come on day one, but as they go through, they know that they're going to see the updates to the policies and see the new information that comes out with each of those policies.
Absolutely. And there's nothing worse than starting a new job and sitting around waiting to get logged into your email or your badge. I can see how that makes a big difference. They can really hit the ground running day one.
We've talked to people that have come and gone, and that was a significant or a reoccurring theme. And what we had is that they felt like we weren't organized bringing them on. And so that was something that we heard loud and clear. And now we definitely don't get that feedback. And we may get a little bit of information overload feedback, but it's there. And I always tell somebody, you're not signing that you completely understand it. You're signing that you understand that there is a policy for this, so that that, okay, I can pull it up on the app on my phone and go, okay, we do have a policy for when I travel outside of our municipal area, those kinds of things. So it's really made people more aware of what we have and what the city has and what the city's expectation is.
Absolutely. Yeah, and we'll go into a little bit now. Oftentimes, and IT, sometimes y'all get a bad reputation for saying, oh, we can build that in-house. You don't need to buy software. We can do that, right? Talk to me about, because you do some things in-house. You do purchase third-party software solutions.
Yeah.
What is your thought process of building versus buying? What's your framework you kind of go through? And then how did that tie into your decision to buy a policy management software than try to build something yourself?
Not to lump us all in the same category, but us IT people think, yeah, we've got, I can do that. And that's generally the case. But I think there's some things that are really important to consider. I will kind of fall back a little bit on the cybersecurity piece and how that has really increased the workload and the burden of information systems departments and staff. And so, one of the things, we're the city here, we're in the process actually next week of rolling out a new website. And we're going through that process of doing that. Well, there's some applications on our old website that we wrote in-house, and now we're kind of gritting our teeth trying to figure out how we're going to replace that, how we want to, because you end up supporting something that you've written. And if you have the resources to do that, I understand that. But to me, we've really shifted what we're doing, and we are talking about the limited resources that we do have. And the cost, over the last several years, the cost of things has gone up. So, to be able to offload certain functions or be able to purchase that, it's always going to be, you're going to have people that have opinions one way or the other. But my opinion is, I have limited resources. I want my staff working on the things that really are most critical. Whether it's protecting data, whether it's our perimeter defense, training our employees on the dangers. Cybersecurity awareness training is a major function of what we do, and the better we educate our employees, the better that we are going to be as an organization, and really, quite honestly, the better they are going to be in their personal lives. So I think our approach has been, let's find something that will fill what our needs are, and let's see if we can make this work within what our processes are. And so I'm a firm believer that the expertise that NEOGOV and the policy platform brings to us is one that it's very difficult to be, yes, we can create a little web application that tracks everybody's doing this or that, but does it help your Parks and Rec department and their accreditation process? Does it help the law enforcement with CALIA and their accreditation process? We have 4 departments that are going through that go through various levels of accreditation, and so the NEOGOV policy platform really is a when assessors come in and see that, they're like, oh great, they're very pleased about it. Law enforcement requires it, but CAPRA is kind of 50-50 on how they do that. But so to me, that's important. The having the time and staff resources, having the expertise that NEOGOV brings to the table, and from my perspective, the cost versus the benefit. So the cost of that annual cost that we have with NEOGOV is far outweighed by the expertise, the time that I can shift my employees to other areas. So for me, it's when you really do a cost benefit analysis, it's a no-brainer. But I get it with budgets being stretched and that some people like to try to take that on themselves. But I'm a firm believer in what we spend and what we use NEOGOV for is it's well worth that cost, and really we feel we get far more for it than what we're paying for it.
Yeah, absolutely. And it is my understanding you still do certain things in-house and you can't outsource it all, but you're with each situation, you're weighing the pros and the cons and figuring out what really is the best use of your team's time and top priorities.
Developers, we don't want to be, we did it in the past, and we've, slap ourselves on the back of the hand kind of thing. We've learned our lesson, and from our perspective, that we're better off having that provided by people that have that expertise and have that knowledge.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, let's talk a little bit about, you've talked a bit about it before. We'll just kind of recap kind of the benefits you've seen. Again, some of you may know it as Power DMS or Power Policy or NEOGOV Policy. Let's talk a little bit about the change in accessibility. I actually have a picture of your folder structure up here. Maybe we can share a little bit about how you're managing this at a citywide level and all of that. Would love to hear the benefits it's brought from that perspective.
The bullet points here are really pretty spot on. One, we wanted critical information in one spot, and we wanted the ability for everyone that is throughout the departments in the city of Grove City to have access. So that top folder, the number 1 there, citywide, is where our policies are, our city administrative orders. That's our policies in the city of Grove City. Our org charts, all the things that are constantly evolving and updating are in there, so that if someone goes, where's the most current org chart? I can go to the citywide folder, I see organizational chart, here's the one day, oh, it was dated from 3 weeks ago, I know this is the most current one. So that's, when I first put all this out there, the numbering system that I put together, people kind of chuckled about. And so, you know, yes, it was a little bit of my OCD coming out, but how we we did this is, under citywide is our administrative orders, and then there's a section that is finance is section 1. So the first policy in there, so it would be 1.1.1.1. So they're numbered accordingly. So again, I've been made fun quite a bit about that, but when I'm looking for a policy that might be 4 dot whatever, I'm like, oh, I can look in that. I know that 4 is going to be community and business relations here based on this folder structure. So not only do the policies that we have in place and the procedures and the documents we have in there, they're numbered that way. They're numbered that way so people can know exactly where to get to those if it's explained to them what that numbering system means. And so it's a good thing. The last thing I would say too is, as we become more technology dependent as an organization, I don't think anybody can say that organizations are becoming less dependent on technology. The ability to access that in a mobile environment. So the mobile app for Power DMS is tremendous. We have probably half our people that have city devices that have that app on there. That's how they're signing off on their policies. That's how they're referencing their policies if they would ever need to do so. So I've gotten feedback that it's extremely easy from the mobile app, and I would agree. I have it on my phone. When someone goes, "What's our policy?" I can just pull out my phone and go, "Oh, here it is. It's this." And I have the ability to send it to them directly from my phone and go, "Here, I just emailed you that policy," so whatever it might be. So again, the accessibility is something, and like I said, I've been made fun quite a bit about my structure, but now I think people appreciate what that structure is and why I did it.
Yeah, and absolutely. And the structure is flexible. That's just kind of the system that you
Right.
all came up with. It's flexible for the organization. And speaking of the mobile, we hear a lot, especially in the public safety folks, they can put floor plans in there, things that really aid with that on the job. And more cities have a lot of people, they're not sitting at desks, they're not sitting at computers. So that mobile app allows them to have access to policy procedures, maybe for floor plans, or just different on-the-job type materials that are really nice to have, in their pockets and at their fingertips.
Yeah, and
And
that's across the board. I'm sorry. We
yeah,
have
go ahead.
data from our website update that really about 3/4 of the people access that data from some sort of mobile device. So having it mobile enabled is key.
Absolutely. And I'll just speak really briefly on this. Your police department's CLIA accredited, Parks and Rec pursues CAPRA accreditation. We also, policy works with the standards product accreditation. So if, or your agencies are able to link their policies to the accreditation standards, and that's a capability. And if your fire is not CPSC, but those are available through the system. So just wanted to mention that. And talk to me about accountability. I know you actually have a story where this really came into place because you had that signature. You were able to kind of enforce when there was some personnel challenges.
Yeah, and not that that's something that I would take that no person is excited about those situations where you have to kind of call someone in and say, "Hey, here's our policy on this." But the fact that we have the accountability, and we can say, you've received this policy, you understand this policy. So in our case, a probationary associate was spending a little bit too much time on social media, and we've had that conversation a couple times. So when we put the material together, to kind of separate from that employee, we had all our policy sign off. We had the stuff that we had in place, and so it made things a little bit easier about how we do that. And so the fact that people are aware of what policies are, whether it's our EEO policy, our workplace policy, they understand what those things are.
Yeah, absolutely. And kind of finally, I love, you've told me quite a few stories how having policies and kind of the central repository and a digital systems really helped with efficiency and kind of allowed y'all to level up in a lot of different areas. Here we've got one of your procedures that you've loaded into the system. Tell us a little bit about how this has kind of morphed once you got through more just the basics of the policy management and acknowledgement, where you've taken it next and all of that.
And that's really, we saw the value of the platform and having information in there and having, review of whether it's policy, standards, procedures. And this is one of our procedures. It's the first page of an Active Directory account management procedure. We've really taken the approach that, and it's really came around building our security program that, yeah, it's one thing to say that you do this, but it's another thing to say, well, how do you do this? And, how do we hand this off to someone that's never done it before? And so that's been one of my approaches to this is to actually document our procedures and policies so that people can understand step by step. So if you look at the bottom of this one, it says adding an Active Directory user. So you launch the Active Directory. So it's step by step so someone can walk through that process and understand that process as we do it. So never,
Yeah, and
never fails in a webinar and they're drilling or something. So I apologize.
Yeah, it's okay. It's okay, Todd. Yeah, and to add to what you're saying, you've been with the city now 30 years. There's probably just so much institutional knowledge and starting to get some of that documented because hopefully you'll get the chance to retire one day, and you want to leave a lot of that knowledge behind. And we're seeing that more and more, rates of retirement going up in the public sector. So are those things getting documented? Is that institutional knowledge being left behind and in a place that is accessible and consistently updated?
Yeah, and there's standards that NIST, that's the standards by which our security program is governed, and so we have, it's one thing to do something, but it's another thing to have policy, have standards, and have procedures and compliance for that to understand. Okay, yes, here's here our policy is, here's the standard to which we do it, here's how you do it, the procedure, and then here's the compliancy check that yes, we are doing that. So those are the things, and in building, at least in the IT world, a cybersecurity program, it's doing what you say you're going to do, when you're going to do it, and how you're going to do it. And so that's being able to document those things is very important.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, a couple of takeaways, kind of want to summarize some of the things we discussed today. One, don't treat policy management just like a checkbox, right? You've seen it's really promoted excellence and professionalism throughout your organization. And the bonus of it's created a great new hire experience. You said people previously felt like when they got hired, nobody, was very disorganized, and it's created a much more organized process. Yeah, AI is changing the workplace. I challenge everyone to have you put a policy in place for the use of AI, whether you're updating an existing policy like your appropriate use policy or something brand new. Be thinking about that. And then obviously collecting and tracking signatures on, if you can't do it all, have signatures on all policy. I know, Todd, we've talked about this, really focus on those high liability policies. I think you've said to me in the past, a couple of them that are more critical, maybe you don't get signatures on everything. Do you have like a quick laundry list of the things, if you're doing nothing, at least think about these things?
I think if you do not have an appropriate use policy, the policy that addresses, how, what behaviors you expect, those kinds of things when using city assets, I think if you don't have one of those in place, you're asking for trouble. Trouble, not, and it may not be, but significant trouble. But if how would you? What grounds would you have if you didn't set that expectation with a new associate? So to me, that's probably the most important one, and everybody should sign it, whether or not they're using computer assets or not. We have everybody sign that because we never know when they're going to transition from one role to another, and so, or that role that they're currently in changes. Our service department is a good example of that. We're implementing a system that now the entry-level service technician is going to carry a city device, and they're going to be assigned tasks via that device. So that's an important one. Our ID policy is important. We have policies on where you wear your policy, when you're supposed to display your policy, so that people are aware that who you are and what your role is, and if they ask for your ID, you have it readily handy. So those are two that really come to mind. But all of the standard human resource policies, whether it's your equal employment opportunity policy, your drug abuse policy, your substance abuse policy, workplace violence, harassment, all those standard ones that you would, most HR people that are on the call today would understand. Oh yeah, those are those core ones that you have, and make sure that you keep them up to date.
Absolutely. And kind of a final key takeaway before we move on to the Q&A, I'm seeing lots of questions. Keep sending them in. We really appreciate it. Is technology, especially policy management technology, can really enhance the efficiency of your organization beyond just the policy management, some of those procedures, general orders, whatever those key day-to-day job critical documents are. And we'll have a resource for you. We'll email it after today. It's the 5 benefits of policy management software in government. So be on the lookout. We'll send you a copy of that after the webinar. And let's transition to the questions. Got quite a few in here. Hopefully I don't miss any. One interesting question, how do you deal with policy acknowledgement fatigue?
That's a great question. And so we really try to, it was when we first brought everybody on, you're going to have to sign off on all the policies. So we really, we do annual review of policies, but that doesn't necessarily mean that there's an update push to that of that policy. So we try to group them in a couple months in the year, so they're not getting one. Oh, I got another one this month, kind of thing. Some of that is determined by who's doing that update or review of the policies. Sometimes they get stuck in that process a little bit. So, but we try to keep them grouped. That's one that it is very real and very, I'm very, like, I've got a policy that we just updated last month that now I've got another update for. So how we handle that, and like, no, I've already signed this one. So yes, it's a challenge, and it's one that's why I have going out on a weekly basis that report to the department heads to understand that, hey, we have these policies that certain employees haven't signed off on. So yeah, it is a challenge.
Yeah. And interesting question here. I believe you're managing it. You have different people with different access in the system to manage their group of policies. But somebody asked, does your organization have like one coordinator uploading all the documents? Or I'm assuming you have department heads kind of responsible for their group of policies and uploading those and making those updates. Is that correct?
We have administrators in each of the departments, so they can manage the documents in their department and the stuff that's important for their department. I manage my department information systems, but I kind of got tagged to handle all the citywide stuff as well. And that way we're understanding where those things are. But we typically have an administrator in each department that is responsible for what they have in their department. We're very stringent about security is granted to groups, and groups are assigned to folders and that, so that, okay, if so-and-so leaves, the permissions weren't assigned to that specific person, it was assigned to him in that group, and so that we can kind of keep things kind of organized, and as people transition in and out of the organization, it keeps things clean as well, and we don't have to go, okay, how do we set this person up? And so it's by doing by groups is important. So we do have one in each of the departments, yes.
Fantastic. And talk to me a little bit about how do like approvals work? There's workflows and different things, but I'm assuming maybe sometimes a city lawyer needs to look at stuff. Can you talk to the attendees? There's just questions about shared governance and multiple approving bodies. What does that look like? And I know the system has the flexibility to kind of accommodate to whatever your approval process are, but if you can maybe give a high level of what that looks like for you all for context.
And one of the most powerful things, in my opinion, about the NEOGOV policy platform is the workflow. So let's, for instance, if there's a policy and information systems, I have two of my managers, they review that, they both sign off on that. It comes to me from my review, but there's only one policy person in the city of Grove City, that's our city administrator, and then he has to approve that policy. So we have that workflow built in there. But I was given a folder this morning because my boss is very much old school, so he likes paper and likes to have it printed out. So that's how I've become that person that takes the printed stuff and converts it into the digital asset. But he asked me that very exact question about legal, because we really need to have our law director review some of these older policies. You know, we've had policies in place, because we really need to have him review it to make sure it's still current. So we will add him in that workflow process so that when it gets to that point, it'll go to our law director before it ultimately goes to our city administrator for approval. So
Yeah.
workflow is very, and you know, you can make it as complex or as simple as you want. But to me, having that workflow, having that review workflow, there's review workflow is different than approval workflow. You can make that all different, and to have that function and that power of doing that, to me, it really is important. And you know, that workflow process and having the approval occur through Power DMS and being able to look at the activity and say, okay, here's where the review occurred, here's where the approval is, and then here's the sign. So being able to show an auditor that goes, okay, yeah, and they'll ask me to pull up individuals, and you know, that's how they do the random audit part of it. And we can show them, here's their activity, here's where they received it, here's where they signed off on it, here's the policy, here's where it was reviewed, here's where the manager signed off on it, the director signed off on it, the law director signed off on it, and now the city attorney. So there's all those things that when it comes to compliance, especially in the audit process or in the accreditation process, really becomes, it makes things extremely easy in that regard.
Absolutely. I think we've got time. 2 quick questions. So how does the system notify you when you need an annual review? You get both a task within the product, the policy, it's in NEOGOV policy itself. You also get email notifications when you have tasks to do. So that's all automated, comes to you. And then a question about integrating with the intranet. There's a couple of options there. It depends on your use case, but each document and policy has a unique link. So if you want to put it on an intranet, you can take that unique link, and even if the version changes, that link will auto update in your intranet system. And to add a bonus, we also have a feature, you can make specific policies public facing. So you can actually have them available to the public, and it's policy by policy. And that's a really neat feature, because it, especially in the public safety realm, it cuts down on public record requests because it's all there for folks to view and all of that. Yeah. Lots of great questions today. We're almost out of time. Want to finish before the top of the hour, but thank you so much, Todd. Really enjoyed the conversation today and your expertise. We will be sending the recording of this and the resource that I mentioned, the 5 benefits of policy management in government, after. You'll get all of that tomorrow. But otherwise, thank you so much, Todd. And yeah, thank you everyone for attending. Have a fantastic rest of your day.
Thanks, everyone.